all for coming to our senior reading for this year. We have 7 students reading. It's a wonderful group of writers, as you'll hear. And so that we won't gush over anyone, we have set the rule that we are only going to read the bios that were provided to us. And it's a variety of approaches to the short bio. Our first reader is Alex Quinlan. Alex Quinlan is graduating with majors in English and philosophy. This summer, he will attend the seminar for younger poets at Bucknell University, and in the fall, he will enter the MFA program at Washington University in St. Louis. Alex.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming out. Can y'all hear me okay? All right, I'm going to read a couple of poems. One is in the chat book, I think. If you haven't got copies and you want one, they're at a variety of places throughout the room. This one's called Arabesque. The track bends out of sight behind the trees. Light from the train's headlamp hangs like lace in the bare, ice-bound branches. She reaches. Her shoulder presses against the gear shift as she slams the heel of her hand on the accelerator. I bite into a plum, flip the radio dial. The car lurches, does not move. Schumann's Opus 18, filigree of fox and olive tree, mimosa flowers floating on a dark river's surface. Any moment now, she will scream, as if screaming could rattle the train from its track or startle the car into motion. Juice runs down my hand. I suck the plum like a snake bite. The engine gulps air. Gasoline explodes against the piston face. She sits up suddenly. I take the last bite of plum. Swallow the pit. Train brakes spark like an axe head against a grinding wheel's industrial diamond. Her face is a river's surface when it is summer and the river is a small river, moving slow as the sun, but moving still. Light cracks against the window, filling her lap like water. This one's called Dismantling the Heavens, and it's based on a Spanish form called Requesta y Respuesta, which is basically just question and answer. And I basically left it intact, but I freed myself of the metrical requirement. Dismantling the Heavens. Were the lost ever found? Even crucifixion is a symbol for something other than crucifixion. What were their names? Shadow and longing are the river's language. Flame and dust, that of sky. How is the face of loss a rain-rutted hillside? Leaves hold thimblefuls of moonlight. Children carry fireflies in cupped hands. How many dead were carried away? The osprey dives from its perch. Its white breast doubles back light's reflection on water, blinding its prey. No. How many were carried away? To push a canoe from shore, even a paper one, takes letting go. Can I move it? Want to make sure I'm not going over time and boring you all to death. This one's called The Middle Ages. And I took it from an essay that this psychologist wrote on his own experience with madness. He went into a kind of a schizophrenic delusion that lasted a few months. When he was in college, after he read the Screw Tape Letters by C.S. Lewis. I'm sure some people in here are familiar with it and can see maybe why that happened. Anyway, the Middle Ages. Between dark and light, we are inexorably destructive, literal, inventive. A freight train, a metal roof, the way things turned out. That summer was a penny, paid out for memories of cows and sheep. My cousin, as he walked home from class, one cold afternoon 10 years back. Part of a waking dream that demanded battle between dim, stiff-muscled visions of the universe. I hadn't even had sex, and I was nothing more than the consequence of someone else's crippled journey. A pretty girl, the fiery shell of willing deceit. It all made sense, had significance beyond itself. I hadn't tried to convince most of the people I work with. Blaking, I preferred to declare myself in visions, thinking, your arguments become a part of that which you argue against, and so on. Though we are mostly sure which is which, it may be the line between madness and angels is controlled increasingly by arguments of expedience, addiction to the seductive quality of an inhumane wholeness. The freight of memory, trained in heroic, dishonest ways, ashamed of emotion, having labeled and displayed our inner lives like creatures in a zoo, an exorcism of strange and terrifying gods. Thanks, Matt.
So I'm going to introduce Joy Beaton. She's a communication major from Knoxville, Tennessee. She says she should have just been an interdisciplinary. However, since her dissatisfaction with communication studies led her to add minors in English, government, and writing. Immediately following graduation, she will travel to Thailand for 2 months on a mission trip with Campus Outreach, a Christian organization. She's not yet decided what she wants to do with her life, but she is sure it will be something unique.
This first piece I'd like to read for y'all was an exercising class in which we were asked to develop a powerful image. And so this was my attempt. This is inspired by my astronomy class. Imagine the horizon, vast, vast, so vast that the curve of the earth melts into the long, strained plane of this netherworld. We are floating between cloud layers, between two interminable parallel horizons, deep gray in the dark noon of this wintry planet. It is by no mistake that Saturn was associated with insanity in medieval times. Its enormity and coldness blow the mind, 755 times the size of Earth, and a bone-numbing negative 288 degrees Fahrenheit, just 95 degrees above absolute zero, the pure absence of heat. Saturn is a raging gray winter storm, an immense howl of gases whirling one complete rotation in half an Earth day. The clouds brood in layer upon dense layer, slashed by winds more than 1,000 times an hour, 5 times faster than the wildest hurricane winds on Earth. The dim light of the sun, an overbright star in the distance, barely illuminates the deep chaos. Imagine our little Earth there, suspended between layers of cloud, dark gray on dark gray. Where the sky should be, there are 2 parallel horizons, stretching out farther than any horizon should. The cold beats on us. The pressure bursts our skulls. The laughing helium that floats balloons on Earth, here shudders, condenses, and dies into a lethal rain that falls slowly through layer upon layer of doomed clouds driving toward the center of the planet. This deadliness hovers just a stone's throw across the solar system, a world whose fatal weight effortlessly crushes the very thought of our little lives. How delicate are we, and how gentle the life processes that sustain us. Saturn, the cruel, the proud, whirls in inexorable cold rage, oblivious to our being and envy. I think that that often we don't think of something as real until it's put up right up next to us, and we have to experience it ourselves, which is why I try to put Earth and Saturn next to each other in that. And dealing with reality, from the piece that I have in here, I'd like to read. This is about a girl who is lost in her own reality because of the dissatisfaction that she has with her own life. She's kind of sad. The other girl was completely unaware at that moment that she was ugly. The cars whispered past like ghosts. A dim haze spread over her vision. Her feet guided her. At this very moment, in fact, she was wandering across a barren, gray-swamped moor, chilled by the fine rain that was drenching her arms and her face. She pulled her thin cloak closer around her frail form, staggering onward, nearly falling. Suddenly, a rocky ravine opened out in front of her, and she stumbled over its edge before she even realized it was there. She tumbled down the slope, landing in a heap in the bracken at the bottom. For a moment, she lay fainting, finally gathered her strength and tried to get up. Immediately, she fell back with a cry of pain. Her ankle was sprained. She was rendered helpless. She lay there for 2 hours, drifting in and out of consciousness, till suddenly a darkly handsome face peered over the edge of the ravine. Someone was always being rendered helpless in her daydreams. She liked that phrase, rendered helpless. She also liked gently but firmly. It always filled her with a strange thrill, its connotation of maleness, of tender protectiveness, of mastery. She who had never tasted even the momentary mastery of a man's kiss. Something in her longed to be cared for, to be cherished, for someone to look at her and see straight through her sunken face to the transparent shape of her spirit, to desire her. And she ached for it all the more because she had never been desired. At the same time, it embarrassed her, just wishing it. She was always half ashamed of her own sweet, triumphant dreams. She suspected that they were over-romantic and melodramatic, and was certain she would have died if anyone ever knew them. But she clung to them nonetheless, preferring them to inhospitable reality. It's just a And I'd like to finish with a piece from Dr. Foley's poetry class 4 semesters ago. So I don't know if it's even good anymore. This is called Departed. If she crossed the stream and braved the chain of fern along the meadow, stepping softly into shadow, will she then her feathers shed? Through the brake, pathway slender cuts and sets the ferns a-tremble, faintly tracing out the faded path to which her footsteps tend. In the shade the path divides and wanders through the glades and hollows, darker, brighter still than all the hazy streets the sunlight hides. When she roams the winding pathways, walking one with youth and vision, whispers of the stream may drown the cries of those who see her gone. When the stream she crosses breaks the chain of fern along the meadow, stepping softly into shadow, will she then her feathers shed? Thank you.
John Pruitt. I'll render this so people don't mistake me. John Pruitt was born and raised in Billerica, GA, a small town west of Atlanta that has since been swallowed up by the suburbs. Since being at Berry, he has juggled being both an English and theater major, and since that time has had marginal success as a director, a playwright, and a poet. His one-act play, The Passing Scenery, was staged here at Berry as part of the 2004 One-Act Festival, and it won him the prize of being invited to the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. to study playwriting the same year. At the present moment, writing has taken a back seat to his trying to graduate from college. But he will soon be spending his time working full-time and writing plays and fiction. I hope to move either into theater or film industry as a professional actor, director, or writer. Whichever comes first, some of my poetry has been published in RAM, the Berry Literary Scene, and he recently published his first stage production of Tom Stopper's play, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, to which he created his own play, for which he created his own play company, Neil's Big Secret, and more accolades to come.
dialogue, heavy writing, and such and so forth. I'll read the monologue that was published in this. This is one of the exercises that came out of my time in Washington, and it was an assignment it had all these certain criteria you had to go through, and like a dialect and so on and so forth. And I thought what came out of it was quite nice. So, Lang side, monologue. Francis is an Irishman who lives on the south side of Dublin. In the scene, he is standing by the crib of his infant daughter, Morgan, telling him about Erin, his mother. In the room are her crib, a shotgun, and a window with moonlight spilling in. Francis. You know, at first sight, I knew you had to be mine. Your red hair and green eyes made me smile and love yours more. To me, you look like a fairy child in the old storybooks. You were the most beautiful thing in life itself. When I met your mother, I felt the same way. Erin, too, had those long locks of red fire going around the face. Instantly, I was hers. When I was with her, I never knew of the world around me. She was my world. And in an instant, that world was ripped away from me. Picks up the shotgun, he admires. The first time I said I love you to her was when we were at a football match. It's funny. She didn't hear me the first time I said it to her. I thought the lads had ignored me. I kept telling her again and again, but the music was too loud. The people around us wouldn't shut the holes. Later that night, when I was lying next to her, I was staring out at the moon through the slats of her blinds. Erin was curled up in a blanket, sound asleep. I told her then that I loved her, utterly, totally, and for all time. That was what I wanted to say to her before, and she still hadn't heard me. I felt then her fingers touch my face, and she was said the most haunting words I've ever heard in my life. I love you too. Bugger if it didn't make me go arseways. Morgan Coos. It was around when we brought you home, Morgan, that your mother died. You see, she was legging it from the market with some bread for the supper I was cooking that night when she had an accident. She was hit by a twisted Egypt in an automobile coming home from the local. She was mostly crushed on impact, but she managed to keep her ticket beaten until I got to the hospital. The bullet that hit her kept on going, like nothing had happened. Morgan Coos, reaching into his memory. I love you too. You see, Morgan, when your mother passed on, she left me with these words. She left me alone and adrift in this huge world without a compass or a map on where to go next. She left you too. You were indeed mine then. Not anyone else's, but mine. And every time I look at you, I see her, Morgan Coos. You know what, my darling Morgan? I found that bleeding wanker last night. It took me months to do it. I know where he lives and everything, and I'm going to go over there tonight. I'm going to set things right with the world. Give that fucking bastard what he deserves for what he did to my Erin. I'm going to march right up to his red front door, ring the bell, and when I see that manky Chevy Chase of his, I'm going to blow a hole in it. I'm going to make him pay. Francis drops the shotgun. Beat. Morgan begins to cry. Francis is frozen by the sound of his daughter. He comforts her. Long pause. What should I do, man? I can't just let him go, huh? The man's a devil. He can't go unpunished. But what's me then? Would I be as devilish a man? And would I be as devilish as him to take a life in the eyes of gold? Yeah. I'll not have you be orphaned on the streets with the gits and the golf strikes. No, I'll not leave you alone in this big lonely world. I'll not let you drift, my darling Patty. Let's see. I didn't bring anything else I was prepared because I didn't know I was supposed to. So, that's me. If you know me from class, I'm hardly prepared. I'll just read the next. I wrote this for Dr. Cooley's advanced rhetoric and writing class. Musings on the arriving warmer months to my friend Paul. What a season to be beautiful without a reason, the white stripes. And these are the days in the mad west stirring. Spring is a very vibrant word for the season recognized, isn't it? The very intonation is that it crouches and leaps upon the world playfully after the dreadful desolation of winter has ebbed away. The flowers spring forth in full bloom, blossoming foliage and fruit swelling to the full rotundity fills bushel baskets. All the earth erupts in full bounty. Bees buzz around the heads of playing children, forcing them to flee for their lives from the opposing tiny black lances. Mosquitoes perch on unsuspecting layabouts who rest under the cool shade of fat-leafed deciduous trees, hiding from the growing light of the sun. This spring promises to be like last spring, hot and breezy as the spring before that, arriving ever tardy in the minds of those people who couldn't wait for winter's chill till fate. Did you know that the Druids celebrated the coming of spring by the way of bonfire feasts and nudity? Imagine. Stonehenge bathed in firelight, a dozen naked shadows dancing across the stones in joviality. Happy faces drinking wine and grinning up at the full moon's pale face while it and the stars smile back at them. Tiny little people who exist now only as wisps of words in our textbooks. They, the heavens, continue to beam upon us today, reminding us that we too are fated to be, at best, immortalized into words when the wine bottles have emptied. The Druids had a great appreciation of life that was heavily entrenched in the earth and considered the season of spring to be perhaps the most important of all. Their goddess of offspring and springtime, Estrid, came back from the dead, her vivacity spreading vigorously across the entire planet. It was life incarnate, the top of the cycle of life from her birth, and any sunny day on the British Isles is indeed a miracle. The same applies to the Greeks after a fashion. To them it was the happiness of Demeter, the goddess of the harvest. She showered the world in plenty when she had custody of her daughter Persephone, the bride of Hades. When she returned to her husband in the underworld, Demeter would cause the world to be cold and barren in the woe of Persephone's absence. But it is more to Bacchus, the Greek god of wine and song, that we fashion our revels after. We college students continue the traditions of celebrating the season in our own way, spring break. We may not realize it, but traveling to exotic locations like Cancun or Panama City Beach and taking full enjoyment in drinking and carousing is, in its own way, echoes of the past. Here we run amok with riotous laughter, singing and bearing as little clothing as needed. We take the merriment Bacchus stood for and rub a bit until it putters out. And when we have exhausted all resources, burned several bridges, woken up in many strange places with no recollection as how one got there the night before, we pack it up and go back to our normal lives. In this way, we share the celebration with those before us and give into a sense of carpe diem, a fine golden thread that has woven itself from the time of the Greeks to the Druids and more recently in history, the Bohemians who endeavored to enjoy the art of life in full measure. But drinking binges and public disturbances aren't the only ways that we celebrate our livelihood. With everything blooming, one can't help but let the mind wander to more carnal thoughts. Spring, my friend, is a time for wooing. It is a time for letting loose one's tightly gripped libido, to speed into territory uncharted and seek pleasure that only the touch of another can provide. This is what spring does to the beings on this planet. It makes them mad with passion. The rabbits, the bugs, the dolphins, and slugs, even the trees are mad for sex. Well, perhaps not the trees. They're more content to the benign sort of feelings in the matter. It is the growing heat warming the growing passion in our souls. It is the passionate warmth that melts away the solitude of the deadness of winter. It is nature painting color over the gray whites. Walt Whitman implored impressionable minds to live deep and suck the marrow out of life, to take advantage of this word called living instead of merely being. Spring is the time to appreciate what we have, to read poetry and make love, to use one's life as a canvas on which to create and grow, germinate ideas, ideals, idiosyncrasies, and breathe the air around us before we cannot any longer. The whimsical message spring possesses is the truth that life itself is not evergreen. Like the fruit that is harvested and the flowers that bleed their colors onto emerald grasses, life eventually fades from every vessel that it fills. This is a seemingly depressing message indeed, but underneath is a hidden hope. Spring is celebrated immensely because it embodies the carpe diem mentality. Life is fleeting, yes, but life is precious. Life is beautiful, true, yet life is fragile, to be cherished and not wasted. If you can tolerate the pollen and the sunburn, you can witness a glimpse of paradise. It is a time when the earth, the sky, this world, and the next can exist right in front of your eyes if you're willing to just see. The old feel the youth feel invincible, and air conditioning repairmen smile in anticipation of the lucrative season ahead. And the last thing I'll read is a poem called Moon, which came out of Dr. Ming's intro to poetry class. And despite the interpretations that were done, it's about my frustration in writing and trying to force creativity onto the page. Moon. Intellectual hatchling of I, wrought painfully from placenta, my body a wire coat hanger, back just as bent. Empowered by salamander fire, my consequential need dire to feed and quench this unsated lust of false creation. Obsession cascades down sweat-shined brows and stabs my slimy hide with needles, brown rusted, whitening dead man's eyes, milky blaze blues. Queens and kings smashing headlong, fracture and splinter and perforate conceptions such as love. The holy power unraveled by the hourglass's winds and chimes of the death keeper's whistle. Just enough clicks of the skinning hand to play with the words and shape my own image out of vaporous clay. Stamping my imprint into the earth, trampling over others, faded in leaves, cleansed with flame and vital blood. And hope my essence won't erode the same with the deserting light of day, prisoned by the sheen of fresh tears. Thank you.
Leslie Wade is an English major with a writing minor, and she has worked on ramifications as well as the carrier. She says that she continues or intends to continue her education with a bachelor's in business and then law school. She was born in Houma, Louisiana, and lived in the Marietta, Kennesaw area for most of her life. She says that she's been privileged to work with Karen McElmurray, Melanie Sumner, Mike Mejia, me, and Michael Cooley, all in the writing program here at Barrett. She also says that she didn't really know what else that she was supposed to say, but if we had any questions, she would respond to them. That was actually directed to me, but I thought I'd leave that open too.
First of all, I'd like to say that I'm not a poet. However, the first two things I'm going to read for you guys are poems. And the most logical reason for that is that because I'm not a poet and they're decent, I like them. So the first one is called To Tibet, and I have two footnotes on here. The first one is the mention of Mara. Mara is the Hindu god of samsara, which is the life cycle of birth, suffering, death, and rebirth. And then the second one is explaining samsara. So basically, only one. Okay. To Tibet. This wall has had many lives, has passed through Mara's cycle several times, has known desire through sex dripping with lust, yearns for enlightenment, and has a map of Europe in the way of emptiness. To the south of Spain, where Africa should, lie whispering daisies from the room of a hidden child turned mother woman, revealed by peeling paint and plaster, more like water lilies upon an algae lake, inviting the curious to swim among the dirt of secrets kept and shared, filled pages and sacred love. To the west are mountainous peels of paint, showing nothing but shadows, silhouettes of the real, scars of the pain, murmured truth, samsara. To the north, over antibacterial snow, and several pulsing veins that will soon avalanche to prevent the spread of infection. The paint has seen nurses feed orphans who need to be touched to live, and old men who need to be touched to die. But to the east there is flawlessness, continuity, sunrise. To the east, truths are experienced, not murmured, and walls are Buddha. To the east, moonlight paints roses with fire, and the ground is a witness. As a side note, that obviously has a lot of Buddhist references to it, and the idea of emptiness is a very positive thing in Buddhism. And the painted roses with fire, there's a production of the life of Buddha that is a film production, and they use as part of this confrontation that he goes through internally with Mara, they use the image of flaming arrows turning into roses as he conquers Mara. The second one is a paradel. And a paradel is a fixed form poem that repeats the first and third lines, and then the sixth and seventh line of every stanza contains all of the words from the previous lines. And then the final stanza contains all of the words from the whole poem. So it may sound a bit redundant, but paradel at dawn. On chaste wings night trespass tomorrow. On chaste wings night trespass tomorrow. I heard the weeping crimson sun. I heard the weeping crimson sun. I, weeping to the morrow's sun, heard wings trespass on chaste crimson night. A heaving stranger mislove with lust. A heaving stranger mislove with lust. I set hard voices to warm shadows. I set hard voices to warm shadows. Warm love, shadowing lust voices, set hard with a mist, heave eye to strangers. Aurora splits two thoughts of self. Aurora splits two thoughts of self. A pendulum between hurt and healed. A pendulum between hurt and healed. Pendulum of Aurora splits thoughts, and I, between two selves, healed hurt. A hard stranger pendulums with lust warm thought, heard trespassing between chaste cells, and splits the crimson mist of morrow. Sun, setting on two shadowed wings, healed hurt night voices, weeping love, I, to Aurora. Okay. And that's one of the other footnotes that I should have given you was Aurora is the Roman goddess of dawn. So it made more sense. I think that's time, isn't it? So I have a little bit of my actual fiction. Okay. All right. This one is called Pop, and this is my mother was once a girl in the body of a woman. It was in 1988 that she was forced to catch up with herself. My family lived in a small, freshly painted yellow house in a part of town where rent was cheap and the cracking sounds of gunfire were never heard because they were too familiar. It was summer in Louisiana. The air was so weighted by the humidity that breathing was impossible even indoors. Yet I spent the summer running up and down the streets of the two-block neighborhood that we lived in as if oxygen was optional. The canals were never refuge from the heat. The alligators enjoyed the cool water as much as we did and had a greater claim to it. It was on such a day that Christine came to take us to a local swimming pool. Your mother needs a break, and besides, you two will enjoy the sun and water, she said. We will boil you, she said, ruffling my hair, in a pool like a lobster, and then you will cool to a nice dark tan color, just like your mother. There was also a promise of ice-cold Heath bars and Coca-Cola. My father worked in the oil field then. It was a good business. He would stay gone for 21 days, giving my mother, my sister, and myself just enough time to become accustomed to living as princesses. We would sleep in the same bed together, with the dog on the trunk at the foot of the bed, eating frozen dinners from every meal, leave our clothes and toys in whatever room was most convenient, and have popsicles for breakfast and dessert. Then he would roll in like a scheduled fog and envelop the house with his routine and desires for the next 21 days. The house must be spotless the moment he walked through the door. Dinner would be prepared and served promptly at 7:30 every night. My sister and I were not only conducted to our own room at night, but he was insistent that we sleep in our respective beds. The dog was to be put on the porch like every animal should, and complaining on our behalf would earn us a night with the goddamn mud. On the day that Christine showed up, my father was there, and my sister and I were glad to escape even for an afternoon. My mother walked us to the car and kissed the two of us goodbye. Jack Daniels and Coke were the only words she spoke to Christine. We drove to the swimming pool and forgot about the smothering fog within the walls of our little yellow house, and had Heath bars and Coca-Colas just as promised. The drive home was quiet, and I let my sister put her head on my shoulder. Your hair will turn green from the chlorine, I said. She didn't bite right that day. We were too tired to put up a really good fight. As we pulled up the driveway, the door and the screen were open. I could see the mosquitoes swarming in. "Damn it, Michael," I could hear through the doorway. I walked into the house behind Christine. My sister sat on the stoop, rocking a doll she had left outside that morning. "Michael, open the damn door." Now I could hear the sobs in my mother's voice. The hall was dark. The only source of light in my parents' room had its door shut. There were muffled exchanges between Christine and my mother. Then she realized my silhouette and screamed at me for the first time. "Get your sister and run now. Get out. Out of the house. Get out now." I stood for a moment and then began to walk. And taking my sister by the wrist, I began to run, and faster, and then faster. And as we ran, my sister asked why the cracking sound seemed so close. And I said nothing, letting the sounds fade into familiarity.
Autumn is from Fairburn, Georgia. Went to Landmark Christian School. English major, writing minor. She's been reading and writing since the 5th grade when she did a book report on Jane Eyre. Worked on the Carrier as assistant lifestyle editor sophomore year and as proofreader this year. Studied abroad in Florence last spring. This semester she's completing a creative project thesis under Dr. Booker. The stuff in her selection is from various creative writing classes and Dr. Huey's intro to poetry. She plans to take a year off before grad school because she wants to earn that job.
Okay. This first piece, I just put a bunch of random excerpts in there. They're not really related at all, so not easier for me. But this first one was from a couple years ago, Melanie Sumner's Intro to Creative Writing. And it started because I heard a girl talking to her friend on the phone, and her friend was named Delphine. And I thought that was a really interesting name. So that's what it was. He's playing my song tonight, Delphine said as they pushed their way through the tightly packed crowd. Someone lurched backwards into them, and James reached out to steady her. "Your song." Delphine smiled as they sat down at a table. "He wrote a song about me last year. He always sings it when he knows I'm coming." James ordered drinks from an unsmiling waitress wearing black clothes and heavy eyeliner. "Jolly place, this." "August loves it. He says it has creative atmosphere." James nodded and looked away as the waitress returned with a tray of glasses. "What is it called?" "What?" "The song." "Oh, it's called My Oracle. Isn't that clever?" Delphine beamed across the table at him. "Yes, very clever. You know, because of my name." "Yeah, I know." "He sang it to me the day he proposed. I felt like I was back in the 9th grade again." "And that's good?" Delphine laughed and put her hand on his. "Don't make that face. There were some high points in 9th grade, weren't there? Like meeting me, for instance." James looked at the empty stage. He saw one stool and a microphone in the spotlight. He pulled his hand away to check his watch. "August will be on soon." Delphine's eyes shone. "Why 9th grade?" He stared through the smoke blue air at nothing. "Did I never tell you about this?" James shook his head. "Strange. Well, remember that day those kids gave me a hard time about my name? I'm pretty sure you were there." When he didn't answer, she continued. "I cried all day, I think, and I refused to go to school the next morning. I locked myself in my room. My mom was worried sick. And then that afternoon, I got a letter in the mail." Delphine paused to look at James, who studied his hands. "Are you sure I never told you this?" He shrugged and murmured something, but the din around them was growing. "Well, anyway," she continued, "the letter was full of passages from Greek plays and poems about the oracle at Delphi. I read and read it all that day and every day after that for weeks. I carried it around school with me, and I never knew who sent it. I think it was my mother, though. She swore she didn't, but, you know." James made stripes in the condensation on his glass with his fingertip. They were silent for a moment. "And I know the number of the sands," Delphine said softly, "and the dimensions of the sea, and I understand the mute and hear those who do not speak." She blushed a little when he looked quickly at her. "I still remember some of the lines." Gripping his glass tightly, James opened his mouth once or twice as if to speak, But the crowd was clapping now. There were footsteps on the stage. A guitar chord broke across his thoughts. It's August. Delphine clasped her hands to her heart and lifted her eyes to the stage as the song began. Okay. Okay. The next piece is just a short little thing. It was from an exercise in Mr. Mejia's writing class this semester. We were asked to describe something with exactitude, and I thought of a fish that my roommate and I had, who is actually dead now. But for a long time, he was in a bowl in our bathroom, and every morning when I got ready, he would watch me. So he is a Siamese fighting fish, more commonly called a betta. In health, he has splendid, many-hued fins of dark greens, brilliant blues, and sudden flecks of gold and amber. He moves with distracting fluidity, flashing from one end of the bowl to the other, still for a moment, suspended, then starting away, fanning water into furious bubbles. Sometimes he glides lazily around the bowl in a circle, his fins rippling with gentle grace, half furled in his languor. In the early mornings, when I am standing at the bathroom counter brushing my teeth or braiding my hair, he will pause for a moment and turn up his grave fish face, blazing with exotic turquoise on each side, and watch me with imperturbable composure. Fish, I want to say, what do you know of hair and teeth? Do you pass judgment on my morning? I have yesterdays and tomorrows which move me from my bed to the shower to the mirror. There are reasons here you can't see. You have now. You have a plant anchored in blue stones that is new every time you find it. Does your memory move beyond this circle you swim? You do not know what causes me to appear here each morning, to sing out your silly name as though I know who and what you are. I wonder what I look like from a fishbowl, a murky blur of white and pink. Perhaps he sees diluted lines of face and arm that run together in a stream of flesh. Sometimes I put a hand mirror up to his bowl, and he becomes fierce at the sight of himself. With a wild swish, he makes a tight circle and faces the mirror again, dancing, his gills outflung, his fins trembling in frenzied glory. I like to see his sudden passions convulse him. He rushes against the glass, turns sharply, shuddering and jerking, and rushes again. I watch him from the corner of my eye while rubbing in face cream. Ha, I think. You don't know who you are either. Angry, afraid, aggressive, he pays me no mind until I move the mirror away. He darts to the plant, hurtles between its leaves, twists down behind the rock, seeking traces of the specter. When he believes the enemy has gone, his confusion fades, his fins droop, and he begins again the sinuous circle around the bowl. It doesn't take him long to forget. And then I put the mirror back again. Okay, last and very quickly. I took Dr. Pooley's intro to poetry class this semester, and for a long time I figured I wasn't a poet, but then I took that class and I knew that I wasn't. But it's like Leslie said, this is the first draft that came back that didn't have maybe we should talk about this written on it. So I'm very proud. It's a solid effort, so okay. It's called Tides. Hard gray asphalt hurts my feet, ugly skies my eyes. I stumble down dingy streets, pushed by tired throngs, sad or angry people under umbrellas. Morning or evening, it's the same. The city sounds of horn and siren, clatter and racket outside my flat, where garbage men bang lids and yell, and doors below me slam and rattle with pictures on my wall of you and me, of palms beside the sea, your hand in mine, our sun-tanned smiles, our golden blooms, our faces free of workday frowns. We lived alone. We drowsed in days of sun and salt. We breathed as easy as a breeze moves leaves, lulled beneath the palms by softly sounding surf. We spent the blue bright nights on warm white sand and silently held hands, and sighed into the ocean's lowly languid rush beneath the sky. Sometimes the hottest hour drove us in our house, where all the doors stood open to the sea, and wind chimes drifted on whispered window breeze. We lived within the rhythm of the waves, the wash of light from day to night, and when the moon moved tides, it pulled us two outside. longer find the moon among the vague and bulky black of buildings that block the sky from my lonely eyes. I stare instead at pictures of the sea, of soft green palms and sun-bright skies, our hands entwined. That's all I have of you, of that short time at the end of the day.
Gina Best will graduate with a BA in English with a minor in German. She is from Columbus, Georgia. For 7 semesters, Gina served in various editorial positions in the campus carrier staff, including 2 years as lifestyles editor and 1 year as opinion editor. She's also worked many on-campus jobs, including freshman mentor, the chaplain's office, and the international programs office. In spring of 2004, Gina studied abroad in Florence, Italy, and considers her time there to be one of her most rewarding college experiences. She will miss running on the biking trail, miss Emmy's lattes, good discussions in English classes, and most of all, the friends who have made her college years the best of her life. Gina plans on taking some time off to do volunteer mission work abroad, possibly with the Peace Corps or with Youth with a Mission, and then possibly going to graduate school for creative writing.
I too have suffered through Dr. Cooley's poetry class. And too bad he's not here to say all this. But this is a poem that I was still working on when Alex asked for the material for the chapbook, so it's not in there. And I think I finally have gotten it to a place where I feel like I can share it. And my 15-year-old brother would probably be mortified if he knew I was reading this, but he's not here, so. Difference. He had almost outgrown his car seat. His long white legs, finished in little Velcro sneakers, suspended over the minivan floor. He had fallen asleep somewhere around Abilene. Reading Little House on the Prairie churned my stomach as my eyes shifted from the blur of trees to the blur of letters on the page. At a rest stop in Louisiana, Mom told me to wake him. I ran my fingers gently through his brown curls, the way I would stroke a puppy's head, cradle a doll. He rubbed his eyes, soon reaching his chubby hands toward me. Now he grips the wheel. I'm told to instruct him. In silence, staring at the blur of trees, I see his reflection in the window. I reach my hand over towards his curls, but he pulls his head away. The car veers over the shoulder. I hit the imaginary brake on the passenger's side. I want to yell at him for pulling his head away, for not driving straight, but he's too big. This is taken from a journal entry, and like most journal entries when I originally wrote it, it's about as boring as a carrier news story. So I changed it a little bit, so I think it's a little more interesting now. March 15th, 2004, 9 p.m. Poor stupid tourists who don't know that you can't buy stamps in tobacco shops. Poor stupid Americans who are suddenly surprised to hear me speak their kind of English. Poor stupid me for not keeping my mouth shut. But I'm not there. Not today, anyway, when we climb to the top of the Duomo, up narrow, dank spiral stairwells reaching to eternity. All right, not eternity. But to the top of the dome, to a view directly above Florence. Autumn spotted our street from the top, and we found, we think, the roof of our apartment building. 437 stairs up and 437 stairs down, but I can't remember the exact number. 430-something stairs, or maybe 420-something. And then we met Beatrice. I don't mean Dante's Beatrice. Though maybe this woman is named for her, she is something of a creative muse. Her yarn shop has bright fluorescent lights and cubbies along the walls filled with yarn I had never seen before. Glitter tassels, gold string woven into solid colors, delicate silk, fine cotton, and thick wool. The surprise in her face of 60-plus years reflected the lights, as we young women bought yarn, and young women don't buy yarn usually. She didn't count on the sale. She just talked to us, told us we could only speak Italian in her shop, and recommended a J-hook for autumn silk yarn. Her shop, south of the yarn room, just beyond the Ponte Vecchio, is along the river, the back window directly over the water, looking something like Venice, but not because of the street outside the front door. And we left her shop, and I branched away from Autumn into a tobacco shop to buy a stamp from my friend Lindsay's letter. My friend Lindsay, who sends me mail every 2 weeks, my only reliable correspondent, one who only gives a response. I asked in English. I didn't mean to. I forget so many times. So those tourists, the honeymooners, they heard me, or he did anyway, asked me, "You can buy stamps here?" Poor guy, so confused. And the girl, wanting him to hurry up so she could go to some museum. I could have told them where to go, and no, I didn't. I walked back home, thinking how it wasn't cold, and how I wished I had a pair of flip-flops. See, can't you? This is my city. Life here has a natural pattern, a natural feeling that I've always been here, and this is the only way life is. And I will always be here, and this is how life will always be. On a perfect, sunny, light blue sky day, when tourists will figure out where to buy stamps, and I will see a view that can't be forgotten. That's all I'm going to read.
Our last reader is Catherine Weeks. Catherine hails from Nashville, Tennessee, where she grew up amid an ever-extending web of aunts, uncles, and cousins. She has spent her summers at Camp Marymount in Fairview, Tennessee, since she was 12, where she learned to appreciate group showers and the great outdoors. She will be heading to Montana in August to pursue an MS degree in environmental studies with an emphasis in environmental writing. Sorry, I really didn't know I was going to be introduced by that. Anyways, just forget about it. I'm going to read the excerpt from a short story that's in the little booklet, which is taken from a short story that I wrote this semester, and it's called Things That Strangely Shape. Sally's memories of the early trips to Mississippi were memories of smell, of odor. More specifically, they were the memories of breath influenced by smell, and the way the very act of breathing had to be adjusted to accommodate the thickening air the further south she traveled. "Hold your nose, breathe through your mouth," her father would pronounce as they neared Bolivar, a town midway on their drive to Water Valley. The town was home to a large paper plant, and the stench of sulfur had taken up residence permanently in the air. It was lodged in all corners, wafted through all open windows, threw itself over a radius of 20 miles or more like a fire blanket, one trying to smother something invisible but vaguely dangerous with its distracting presence. At least this was how Sally's imagination interpreted the noxious odor at 10 years old, and she felt the same way about this added weight to the air as she did about the distasteful romance novels their neighbor, Miss Elliott, constantly read. Full of filth, her mother Effie had explained. People pressing sweaty bodies against each other in some exotic setting, and an excessive use of the word thrust in all sorts of inappropriate contexts. From an early age, Sally listened to proclamations of this type from her mother. As a result, she harbored a well-bred aversion to dinginess of all sorts. And her parents found this charming, found their daughter's refined taste significant for their lives, fulfilling. Though the windows of the Lincoln Continental stayed rolled up as they passed through Bolivar, the scent from the mill permeated the interior of the car, stuck to the leather, clung to Sally's perspiring skin. Only once had they stopped in Bolivar, and on this occasion, some part of Sally's unquestioned good breeding began to slip, to falter. Sally's mother had been ill the previous week, and car travel was making her uneasy. She needed aspirin. Sally had accompanied her father into the Super X. She leaned languidly, as if melting, into his tall, thin figure as he waited in line to pay for the medicine. "Your granddaughter feeling poorly in this heat?" the woman behind the counter said. Her father laughed. This wasn't the first time someone had mistaken Sally for his grandchild. He was nearly 55 and knew his graying hair and sagging skin made him appear even more aged, placing him within the realm of the indistinctly old. This time, rather than correct the error, he said, "No, actually these are for the wife. The little one's just tired," and they left the store. Sally looked up at him as they walked through the parking lot, her face that of a fierce, frightened animal whose instinct has not responded adequately to a present urgency. "King, I'm not your granddaughter," she had said, the flat confidence of her tone piercing the muggy blank space between her and her father. He had laughed again, the same laugh he laughed for the cashier, a laugh the 10-year-old suddenly distrusted. "Why do you laugh at things that aren't funny?" she said. She stood in front of the driver's seat of the car, her arms crossed. He looked at her earnestly, this body that was all angles and anger, this being who Sally knew her father had never really understood. "Your mother's not feeling well, please." "You've missed the point entirely, Father," she said, emphasizing the formality with unfeigned disgust. She stepped away from the door and crawled into the back seat. Her mind oscillated between two poles of cold and heat as they continued on to Water Valley. She would cool, her thoughts would be ice, silent, frozen, and then she would blaze, would erupt, explode. She yelled once to her parents in the front seat. "It's been difficult," and let the words bounce off the closed windows, get caught in the thick, still air. They hung for an instant around the heads of King and Effie, who did not respond. Sally then sat silent. As it lived in her memory, this moment was the one in which she realized for the first time that her parents were old. It was not their age alone that made them this way, not merely that Effie had had her only child at 43, and that her body, whose frailness had written much of the history of her life, had begun to wilt as Sally's grew. Or that King had never quite learned how to approach his child, and had laughed at too much that Sally learned later was not, in fact, funny. There was a certain affectation, a way of being that made the distance between King and Effie and their 10-year-old child immense. What began as a realization in the back of the Lincoln of Oliver unfolded, as Sally grew, into an understanding. She had been reared on the remains of lives and was not really a part of the lives themselves. She had always been surrounded by artifacts. She had been treated as one herself since her earliest memories, as an archaism, an experiment in antiquities. Where she lived, in a brick farmhouse in tiny Fernvale, outside of Nashville, surrounded by retired wealthy businessmen who revitalized abandoned small farms, seemed a remnant of a past age, filled by people hanging their lives in overcrowded closets with the rest of the waking day. She spent most of her time under the care of a governess, Sister Tia, a one-time Dominican nun, and knew few children her own age, save those of her parents' bridge partners. And these twin boys, 2 years her junior, often smelled like relish and were too absorbed in spitting in one another's hair to notice Sally. They didn't really need to anyway. They went to school with girls who, they noted to Sally one evening, made much more sense to them than she. Sally sat silently in the back seat of the Lincoln as it slipped deeper into Mississippi and felt a wall within her struck in a critical place, a wall which began slowly to fall. She became aware of existing somewhere between a waning past and a prematurely wilting future, in a state that could not properly be called the present. In the midst of her rapidly changing emotional temperatures, it seemed the surface tension of her anger gave way, and a smooth, almost liquid thought seeped into her seething mind. She would have to remember to tell Kitty. She fell asleep, sweating, and woke up sweating at her Aunt Kitty's house in Water Valley. That's it. I think that's all I'm going to do. I want to thank you all again for coming, and to our writers, we've been privileged and honored to work with you, and we wish you the best, and you will be missed. And to everyone else, I hope you can stay and talk more with our writers about the amazing things that they are going on to do next. Thank you. Oh, I should turn that off. Candid camera.
Sound.
Thanks.